Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Kid Ink, titled Full Speed. You know it's gonna surprise a fair number of you when I actually say this, given my reputation for having some pretty hardline tough standards for hip-hop music, but I got a bit of a soft spot for Kid Ink, and for the life of me I have a really hard time understanding why. I mean, I get why I like certain artists as a critic. My love of country comes from my fondness for westerns, good bourbon, and better storytelling. My liking for folk and power metal can be directly linked to the wall of fantasy novels in my apartment that's just off screen. My passion for space rock and progressive metal comes from my sharper, more analytical side that got me to get a physics degree, and that also deeply loves science fiction, the other bookshelf just off screen. And my taste for gothic music in various forms, from symphonic metal to post-punk, comes from the appropriation of religious iconography and darker moods that I find incredibly compelling. My love of punk comes from my anarchist days in high school and university. My fondness for boy bands comes from the years I spent singing karaoke and doing vocal harmonies. And hell, even my liking of an act like, say, Kesha comes from an outgrowth of a wilder, trashier pop music that reminds me of the over-the-top, earnest cheese of hair metal that had so much power for me, and I've really liked it. But Kid Ink? As a critic, I really struggle with why I've tended to like his material more than from some objectively more polished and skilled rappers. I mean, his writing's not stellar, his concepts are not unique, and he arguably has less personality than many of his features. So why am I more inclined to give him a free pass over, say, Nicki Minaj? Well, part of this comes down to artistic intent, and then I don't think Kid Ink's trying to make music that's more than just simple club rap, and in that area, he's extraordinarily competent. His flow and his technical rhyming ability are not bad. He's got some good production with melodic hooks, and while he can definitely be pretty sleazy, he tends not to push his luck as much as, say, Lil Wayne does. And you know what, I'll say it, I liked Kid Ink's sophomore record, My Own Lane. It's not a great album, he still works with Chris Brown more than any artist should, but you know what, at the end of the day, the album does exactly what it's designed to do. And on that merit, I have a really hard time calling it a failure. Yeah, he doesn't have as much personality as a duo like Ray Shrimmer or an artist like Young Thug, but his technical skills are a lot better than both of them, and the personality that he does have doesn't make me want to set things on fire, so that's an obvious positive. Now that said, I wasn't exactly looking forward to this. Early critical buzz was suggesting that Full Speed was a step down from his last album, and his most recent features and songs haven't exactly impressed me. And let's be honest, there were an awful lot of guest stars on that track listing that didn't exactly enthuse me. I mean, Migos, Young Thug, not good signs. But then again, I did like My Own Lane, so I gave Full Speed a couple of listens. Was the album any good? Well, I can say this. If anything, Full Speed gave me an idea of what Kid Ink wants to do with his music, and in a way, it's kind of ingenious, because it's the sort of plan that seems designed to print money. But putting aside how incredibly marketable this all is, does it mean we actually get a good album? Well, as I said earlier, it's about expectations. And while I can't say it's better than My Own Lane, it's definitely not, it still mostly accomplishes what it's trying to do. I just argue it's not as enjoyable for all of it. So let's start with Kid Ink himself. And really, there's not a lot to say. As I said, he's extraordinarily competent. He doesn't have a lot of personality or emotional range beyond trying to be the chill club VIP, having a good time. And to his credit, a lot of that is built off of keeping a solid sing-song flow going as long as he can. Where I feel this album takes its first big misstep, though, is in Kid Ink's choice to go darker, especially in trying to cultivate a more subdued, menacing vibe. To be blunt, I don't buy it for a second. Sure, I get the songs where Kid Ink is obviously trying to follow in the footsteps of Drake or Kanye, that eerie, subdued vibe, especially in his flow where it can bite pretty heavily from the both of them. But while he manages to ride these beats well, most of his material is too lightweight, and some of his bars are just too cheesy that buy against production that's this dreary, minimalist, and dark. Kid Ink is at his best, so he's just aiming to party or have fun, build that populist vibe, and thus putting him into situations where he's trying to brag, I'm sorry, they're just not as fun. Now granted, a lot of this comes down to the production and the instrumentation, where most of the changes have taken place. Now, one of the greatest strengths that Kid Ink has is a knack for solid, melody-driven production. And to be fair, about a third of this album kind of makes that work. The opening track, What It Feels Like, with the horns on the hook, the roiling drums and guitar like a faster, that was likely sampled wholesale from a progressive rock tune, the bouncy synth line of the R. Kelly collaboration Dolo, and that brittle percussion and swelling waves of interweaving keyboards on the collaboration with Chris Brown Hotel. But it's here when you start listening to Faster, you'll probably pick up on between the rougher filters and the samples, it's very reminiscent of Kanye West. And when you pair it with the fact that DJ Mustard and a fair few imitators contribute songs songs to this album, Kid Ink's strategy becomes into full view and becomes abundantly clear, taking beats and production that are frankly a lot better than anybody would expect for this sort of material and making them into club-friendly, shallow radio songs. And hell, even when you go into some of the darker material, even if I don't think that he's a good fit for the beat lyrically, he still picks some good production. The oscillating drum line at the back of the cavernous cool back, the pummeling thickness of Round Here, and especially with the horn-accented weed anthem with the drill-like percussion and solid melody of Blunted. These are some good instrumentals. I kinda dug them. If we're gonna point the weak instrumentals, they'll be most of the songs that DJ Mustard picked, the most twinkling, underweight keyboards possible, or the rain-soaked Like a Hot Boy, a collaboration with Young Thug that features a synth tone that needed more depth. It just sounds plain out gross against this muted piano line. It's in these directions where Kid Ink just doesn't sound as good. And I might as well talk about the guest stars, and sadly, the majority of them underperform here. The first immediate disappointment is from R. Kelly, whose verse on Dolo, it wasn't bad, but included this lyric: "Body so dumb, I called it body dodo." And while I get the comparison saying this girl is so incredibly hot, it's stupid, but the comparison to a dodo, a turkey-like flightless bird that was so stupid and delicious it was hunted into extinction, you know, I'll give R. Kelly's insanity a lot of passes, but not for this one. No girl wants to be compared to that. The bigger disappointment is the pitch correction all over his voice, and the complete lack of any sort of expanded vocal range or vocal harmonies, which happens to usher too on Body Language. When you hire two of the most charismatic R&B stars in the industry and you don't let them belt or actually do something with their voices, I'm sorry, that's just wasting talent. And on the topic of Body Language, I'd actually hope that by including Tinashe, they would actually give her some bars, let her fill the Jhené Aiko role like I'm supposed to be with Omarion and Chris Brown, but she's basically a glorified backing vocalist here. That's a real disappointment. Deja Loaf, she continues to not impress me at all on Be Real, but I gotta be honest, the real disaster here is from Trey Songz, who just sounds terrible on About Mine as he contorts his voice that reminds me more of Ray Shrimmer than it ever should. And then there's Young Thug and Brick Baby Shitro on the closer, and while they both actually do kind of match the beat and they ride it pretty well, none of their bars are all that memorable and Young Thug sounds half asleep. The only guest stars that actually work on this album, much to my shock, it's Migos. They're not terrible and actually show more imitation of Kid Ink's flow than the other way around. Typically, rappers tend to bite Migos' flow. It's popular nowadays. And then you have Chris Brown on Hotel, where the two of them are trying to juggle the awkward situation having both their girl and their side girl, or an ex, at the bar at the same time. And if the guest star is designed to make the artist look good, Chris Brown's fumbled attempts to keep the balance are nowhere near as convincing as Kid Ink trying to parlay the whole endeavor into a three-way, only if his girl is cool with it. And you know what? It's not all that badly done. I actually kind of like the song. But now we gotta talk about lyrics. And look, with this sort of album, it's all about the flow. And it's all about keeping things fun, which is why I'm not sure going for darker, more serious and heavy production was the right choice lyrically. And thus, on some level, it kind of makes sense that Kid Ink goes for more braggadocious material, like on Faster or Cool Back, or like the Tour Life on Every City I Go. And when you get tracks like Round Here, where he's bragging about taking some other guy's girlfriends or excluding people from his VIP section, he gets a lot less likable. Considering so much of this album is built off of a pop rap template, and a couple of his bars are really kind of cheesy. I mean, seriously, he raps about Nintendo multiple times in this album. Kid Ink, he needs his populism, or at least focus, to keep him from becoming kind of insufferable. Hell, that's why I kind of actually dug Blunted. As a weed track, it was better written and more detailed than anything Wiz Khalifa has dropped recently, and the wordplay here, it wasn't bad. But it's here where I started thinking about the real contradiction with Kid Ink on this album, in that he's a technically skilled rapper with more than a few good lines, and he's got a really solid flow and cadence, but while he's showing more ambition with his production and beats, his content really hasn't evolved with them, even within the party vein if he wants to keep with that topic. Part of this might be him juggling the guest stars that a label likely shoves on him to compensate for his limited personality, but really, I'd want to hear a Kid Ink project that he did entirely on his own, where he can flesh out his personality and verses actually match his production. Unfortunately, that would likely compromise the steady money-making formula that he's got going on with this album, so I'm not entirely sure I see that happening, at least not all at once, and at least not in the near future. So okay, in other words, Full Speed by Kid Ink feels like a record very much in transition, and as such it feels more fragmented and a fair bit weaker than My Own Lane. As I've said, judging by the standards of pop rap, the majority of this album does exactly what it's designed to do. And I know that a lot more people would probably groove to the darker songs a lot more than I will, but I don't think swapping out populism for arrogance is a good move, not unless he really shifts up his wordplay to really earn that instrumental change. And thus, to me, this record is a 5 out of 10 and only something of a recommendation, only if you're going for that lightweight party record. Nothing more, nothing less. To me, Kid Ink does seem to have ambition. He does seem to have some promise here, but if he wants to elevate himself into the pantheon of recognizable and memorable rappers, he needs to step his game up. and really push the pedal to the metal to make that full speed happen. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'm more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.